Okay, let's just jump right in. Mark your calendars for April 6th, 2026, because on that day, the entire rulebook for your job gets a massive rewrite. We're talking huge, fundamental changes that are going to affect millions of us. Like for new parents, well, the qualifying period for paternity leave, it drops to 0. Yep, 0 weeks. It becomes a day one right. And for trade unions, those controversial rules that have been tying their hands during strikes, gone, completely wiped from the books. And when it comes to who actually polices all these rights, we're seeing a whole bunch of different bodies get merged into one single powerful new authority. So yeah, big stuff is happening. All right, let's get into what this all means. So, what you just saw are the headlines from a massive shift in UK employment law. We're here today to unpack the regulations that basically just turned on the colossal Employment Rights Act of 2025. And I really want to be clear about this. This isn't some minor tweak. We're talking about a genuine seismic shift. And if you work in the UK, you absolutely need to know what's coming. Okay, so you might be wondering, hang on, the Employment Rights Act was passed back in 2025. Isn't it already law? And that's a great question. The answer is kinda. See, a huge piece of legislation like this, it's like a brand new, powerful engine. It's all built and ready to go, but it's just sitting there on the factory floor, unplugged. To actually make it roar to life, you have to connect the power. And that power cord, in legal terms, that's what we call a commencement regulation. Yeah, these regulations are literally the legal on switch. They don't create new laws from scratch. Instead, they just point to a day on the calendar and say, right, on this day, this part of the act goes live. And that's exactly what happened in early 2026. The government flipped a whole bunch of these switches, all pointing to April. So let's take a look at what happens when that power comes on, starting with something that affects families directly. All right, first up, new parents. For years, there's been this hidden catch for a lot of employees, especially fathers and partners. You had to work somewhere for a certain amount of time just to qualify to take leave for your new child. It was a huge hurdle. Well, guess what? That hurdle, it's gone. And you can see the change right here, clear as day. Before April 6th, 2026, you needed that period of continuous employment to get paternity or parental leave. After April 6th, that requirement is just gone. The government has flipped a switch on sections 15 and 16 of the 2025 Act, which means it's now a day one right. And think about what that actually means. Someone could start a new job on a Monday and be legally entitled to take paternity leave on Tuesday. It's a game changer. And those really complicated rules around shared parental leave, a bunch of them are out the window too. And look, this isn't just my interpretation. The official government note that explains these new rules says it right there in black and white. The law removes provision to require an employee to be continuously employed for a specified period. So here's the bottom line. The most important takeaway from this section. For any child expected on or after April 6, 2026, your right to this leave has nothing to do with how long you've worked there. It's immediate. Okay, so from the family home, let's head to the factory floor. Because this next change is just as big, and it completely redraws the map for trade unions and industrial relations in the UK. We're talking about a total reset of what's allowed during a strike, and it's all because of a complete U-turn on some very recent and, let's be honest, very controversial laws. And when I say total reset, I mean it. That minimum service levels code, the one that required unions to guarantee a certain amount of service even during a strike, it's not being changed, it's not being tweaked, it's being revoked. As of April 6th, it's just gone, off the books. The language in the new regulations is incredibly blunt. This is a total removal. And getting rid of that code is really just a side effect of something even bigger. See, the new Employment Rights Act doesn't just bin the guidance, it repeals the entire Strikes Minimum Service Levels Act of 2023. This is a massive reversal, basically wiping the slate clean and hitting the reset button on the whole legal framework for strikes, taking it back to how things were before that 2023 law ever existed. It is a hard reset. So we've got expanded rights for parents and a whole new rulebook for unions. But that begs the question, right? Who's going to make sure everyone actually follows these new rules? Well, that brings us to the third massive shift, the enforcement. It looks like the government is getting rid of a messy, scattered system and bringing in a new sheriff for the whole town. If you've ever dealt with this stuff before, you'll know the enforcement landscape has been a total alphabet soup. You had the GLAA, the Director of Labor Market Enforcement, all these different bodies. And their responsibilities often overlapped, which could get really confusing. The new act basically looked at all of that and said, nope, this isn't working, it's inefficient, and we need a radical change. And that radical change is consolidation on a really massive scale. Part 5 of the 2025 Act gets rid of all those separate bodies and pulls all of their powers under one roof, directly under the Secretary of State. This creates a single super enforcer for the entire UK labor market. We're talking everything from minimum wage enforcement to modern slavery investigations, all handled by one entity. From now on, there's just one door to knock on. And this table gives you a sense of the sheer amount of legal rewiring this takes. You can see it here. In law after law, the phrase Gangmasters and Labor Abuse Authority is literally being crossed out and replaced with Secretary of State. Other regulations are being changed just to scrub any mention of the old bodies. So this is not just a name change on an office door. It's a massive legal and admin project that really shows you how complete this centralization of power is. Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. But if you're an HR manager, a union rep, or just an employee, the question you're probably asking is when? When does all this actually happen? And with so much changing at once, timing is absolutely everything. The good news is, the regulations lay out a very specific day-by-day rollout. Here's the timeline you need to circle in your diary. It all kicks off in April 2026. On April 1st, a few smaller things come into force, but the main event, the big day, is Monday, April 6th. That's when the new parental leave rights go live and those minimum service levels for unions are officially gone. Then, hot on its heels on Tuesday, April 7th, the new super enforcer officially gets the keys to the office as Part 5 of the Act is switched on. So it's a really quick but very deliberate staggered rollout. Now, this packed timeline immediately brings up a really important question, right? What happens if you're in the middle of something when the dates tick over? Say you've started a legal process. Does it suddenly switch to the new rules halfway through? Thankfully, the regulations have an answer for that. They're called transitional provisions. And you can think of them like a legal bridge, designed to get you from the old rules to the new ones without everything falling apart. Let's take a concrete example right from the regulations themselves. Imagine a union is applying for official recognition. The only thing that matters is the date their application is actually received by the committee. If it arrives in their inbox or on their desk anytime before April 6th, even at 11:59 p.m. on April 5th, the whole case is handled under the old rules from start to finish. But if that application arrives on or after April 6th, the new rules apply. It's a really clean, hard cutoff. And this principle is what stops everything that's already in progress from descending into legal chaos. So there you have it, Day 1 rights for parents, a complete reset for unions, and a powerful new enforcer to police it all. The switches have been flipped. The new legal landscape for the UK workplace is officially live. We've talked about what the law says, but the real story, the one that's going to unfold over the next few months and years, is how everyone, employees, unions, businesses, and this new super enforcer actually uses these new tools. The board has been totally reset. The only question left is, how will the game be played now?